Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first annual or first Veterans Transition Speaker Series Zoom call, monthly Zoom call we're going to do. I want to introduce Mr. Terry Homburg. He's going to talk about government contracts. How you doing, Terry? Good to see you on here.
Thank you.
Hey, this speaker series is a way to give back to veterans and really give them some insight about resources that they can get into. I think a lot of times when we get out, or because I'm a veteran myself, we don't know the different things that are around us, different resources that we can use or benefits. And government contracts is something that a lot of veterans are maybe aware of, because especially like for me, I was a supply chain person. So I knew a little bit about veteran contracts. I knew about the GSA. I actually was going to start a business and use government contracts if I got out of it. But I just wanted to go do a little overview about government contracts and some of your expertise. And I know you wanted to talk about this because this is a larger scale, more so than it's a regular TAPS at the local base. So could you just explain a little bit about government contracts?
Yeah, so what we're going to talk about here is federal contracting. There's 4, if not 5 different governments. So when people say government contracting, really need to be explicit as to which government contracting are you talking about. There's capital G government contracting, which is federal contracting. And then there's state, county, cities, and then there's school districts and universities. There's the ports like we have here, Port of Tacoma and Port of Seattle, and they all do contracting and they all do it differently. The federal, I think, I'm probably biased and I have most knowledgeable about, is the most transparent and most standardized and consistent compared to any of the states in the union, because every state can do it differently, and every city can do it differently and whatnot. But when it comes to federal contracting, we tell a lot of my clients, if you're just new and want to get into federal contracting, depending on what industry you're in, you want to start out as a subcontractor as opposed to winning the prime contract from a federal agency. The reason for that is there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of clauses in your contract that you need to abide by. And in part, a lot of companies don't read their solicitation and their follow-on contract. And so they get caught with their pants down after the contract's been awarded and the contracting officer says, you're not complying with this. And if it's serious enough, you can get your contract terminated and you won't get another contract for 5 years, because every federal agency will see your performance evaluation. So it's important to read your solicitation and make that go or no-go decision based on the outcome of your review of a solicitation. And that's one of the things that I do for clients also, is we'll sit down that first or second day, as soon as the solicitation comes out, go page by page. And I have a solicitation review check sheet that I work with clients, and we answer all the questions on that check sheet. And when you get to the end of the last page of the solicitation and all the associated documents, and if there's any amendments to the solicitation, once you're done with that review, you take a look at that one-page check sheet and you make that go or no-go decision. There are many things to consider. I had a client a few months ago who sent me a solicitation, very interested in it. I did the review for them. After my review, set up a meeting with them and briefed them on it. And they said, no, that's not what I want. We're not going to proceed with competing for the award of that contract. So it's very important that you do a thorough review of the solicitation to understand what it is that the federal government is contracting for. You don't need to be shy about whether you can perform the entire statement of work or not. Because if you're going to be the prime contractor, typically prime contractors don't do everything that's in the statement of work. Therefore, there's subcontracting opportunities. And the prime contractor then writes a subcontract, and typically large business prime contractors have a list of subcontractors who they've already vetted over the previous months or years that they've been working with, that's on their list, and they're going to go to them. So for example, a federal agency awards a construction contract to build a building. Well, typically with buildings, there's landscaping, there's parking lots, you know, all these other things. And typically a construction contractor doesn't do all that stuff. They'll clear the site and they'll put the foundation in and they'll go up vertical, but they don't have people or employees that do, for example, HVAC, heating and air conditioning, or they don't have landscape people. So they are going to subcontract that out, and that's perfectly fine. So if you are a company that does, for example, landscaping or HVAC, you want to know who these prime contractors are, communicate with them, get vetted by them. Maybe that contractor does not have work right now, but you're vetted, you are on their list. And when they have a need, they've already know you. They've already vetted you. They know that you're registered in SAM. We'll talk about that. Been in business for a while, your bonding capabilities, whatnot, and then they'll send you a solicitation. You put your proposal together and submit it to them. There may be negotiations. It may be competed. It may not be competed amongst other subcontractors doing the same type of work. And you get your first contract as a subcontractor. So where I started out with is it's better to start out as a subcontractor rather than the prime contractor, because as a subcontractor, you will learn some of the bureaucracy, reporting requirements, submission requirements that are required of any federal contractor. But as a subcontractor, you're learning some of it. You don't have all the headaches and the bureaucratic minutia that a prime contractor has to go through for the entire performance period of a contract. You're learning some of it, such as attending meetings, taking minutes, submitting an invoice, preparing a proposal for a modification to the contract, insurance requirements, all that. So you're learning some of that. I tell clients one of three things will happen after you gain some experience as a subcontractor. First, you get a subcontract, and maybe it goes on for a couple of years. So you get a couple of years of experience as being a subcontractor. Or another scenario is you get a number of subcontracts in a short period of time. Maybe you get 3 or 4 subcontracts over a 1-year period, and you gained a lot of experience over a number of contracts being a subcontractor. But one of three things is going to happen. After that experience that you gain, you'll come up with a decision. Being a subcontractor is pretty good. I don't want to take on that headache of being the prime contractor and having to deal with the federal contracting officer. I'm going to stay a subcontractor and continue being a subcontractor and going out seeking work as a subcontractor. The second scenario is I've gained this experience. I got the staff. I'm willing to get more staff. There's people out there available. I think I'm going to compete to be a prime contractor now. I'm going to step up from being a subcontractor to being a prime contractor, and I'm going to compete for the award to be a prime contractor. The third and last scenario is I'm so fed up with this federal contracting crap. I can't believe it. I am getting out of this. I want nothing to do with it ever again. And I have seen all three scenarios played out in my 29 years experience as a contracting officer. So all three of those happen.
Wow.
That's mine.
Wow. So, man, it opens up a lot of different questions. And definitely we'll display, your information and things like that. Somebody want to get in contact with you in the page. But why do you think that some people do not want to be contractors? And also and number two is, you had told me before, there's a people don't really understand government contracts, so they really misconstrue like the contract. So what's the why do you think some people don't want to be government contractors, and why is it that people don't have this information about government contracts?
I think there's a lot of things that contribute to that. Some of it is misinformation, the information that's out there in the public domain. Some of it might be scare tactics by the large businesses don't want competition.
Mhm.
Other things is, so there's two different groups. There's individuals who want to start a company, and there are companies who want to expand into federal contracting. You know, they've been working in commercial and private industry, could be for years. They're comfortable with that. They're seeking more business. They want to expand into other realms. And another realm is government contracting, whether it's city, county, state, or federal. And each of those do it differently. A good example of that is the socioeconomic certifications, like veteran-owned small business, woman-owned small business, HUBZone small business, the Small Business Administration's 8A program. So there's 4 significant socioeconomic certifications that a company can get at the federal level. But you got to realize, and I hear it all the time, I've got clients that say, oh yeah, I've got my certification as a veteran-owned small business. The state doesn't recognize it. The state doesn't recognize any of the federal certifications. So if you are also wanting to do work with the state, then you got to go to the state website and see what certifications they offer. And for example, the state of Washington, where I'm at, the state of Washington has many certifications, more than the federal government does. So if you're wanting to be a subcontractor or a prime contractor with the federal government, and you want to pursue your opportunities with the state, you need to register and get all the certifications you can for the federal government and the state government. And typically the county and the city follow their state certifications, whether they use them or not. That's up to them. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of federal contracting? Another one is the United States federal government is the largest buyer on the planet Earth. Huge. And they buy everything. One thing that we joke about a few years ago is that one agency bought party balloons. So there's an extreme example. They buy everything. The problem is for a company is finding out which agencies buy what they sell. When I say sell, either, you know, there's different types of businesses. One sells supplies, another one provides services, another one might be a construction company, another might be an architect engineering firm, ship repair, all different aspects and different. There can be more than one federal agency that buys those services. There's 15 departments in the executive branch of the federal government. And within each of those 15, there are agencies within those departments. So for example, the Department of Defense is one of 15 federal executive branch agencies. Within the Department of Defense, there's the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and then there are the civilian agencies within the Department of Defense, Defense Logistics Agency, Defense Health Services. They all have procurement branches. And so then you go to the Department of Homeland Security. Well, a few years ago, more than a few years ago now, Congress in its infinite wisdom took a number of federal agencies and combined them and created the Department of Homeland Security. So you have, what do you have in there? FEMA, Department of Interior, you know, it's probably 15 agencies within the Department of Homeland Security. And then you got Department of Education. There's 15 departments out there, and they all have their, they all come under the FAR, almost all of them. For example, the FAA does not. The FAA, Congress exempted them from the federal acquisition regulations. So there's an anomaly out there. But for the most part, all the agencies have to conform to the federal acquisition regulations. Each department then has its own supplement to the federal acquisition regulations that they follow. And my background was within the Department of Defense, within the Department of the Navy. Within the Department of the Navy, there are 10 systems commands, and every one of those has their procurement instructions and guidance also. And I came under the Naval Facilities Engineering Command, for which there are 5, 6 branches of it throughout the United States also. Actually overseas too, because we have an office in Europe. And so there are lots of agencies, and the thing to remember, and the question I get frequently from clients, is that they want to contact the contracting officer to let them know that they're out there and available, or they want to contact the agency's project manager or the requirements generator. The answer is no, that is not who you want to contact. The person you want to contact is the agency's small business specialist. The federal acquisition regulation requires every agency to have a small business specialist. They are your advocate. They are the go-between person between the agency's procurement office and you, the contractor. That's who you want to talk to. They are your advocate. That is their only job. They do not help large business. They do not help nonprofit businesses. They only help small businesses. So that's who you want to communicate with. And if that agency in the past or currently or in the future has a need for what you sell, they will ask you for a capability statement. It is important for you as a company to have a capability statement. And if you are pursuing contracts for more than just the federal government, say the state or private industry, commercial, then you want to have a capability statement for each of those, because the content of your capability statement is different for each of those. For example, we just talked about socioeconomic certifications. If you have a capability statement for the federal government, you're identifying your socioeconomic certifications like veteran-owned small business or a woman-owned small business. Well, you can't give that to the state because they don't recognize those certifications. They have their own certifications, so that's meaningless. The federal government uses NAICS codes, which is North American Industrial Classification System. The states don't use those. So you put that information on your capability statement and you give it to a state agency, it's noise, it's a distraction, it's meaningless to them. So that's why we say you need a capability statement for the federal agencies, one for the state, and one for commercial. And commercial looks completely different than the other government capability statements. So if you're going after all 3 of those different clients, then you're going to have 3 different capability statements. And we help clients put capability statements together all the time. We have a class just on capability statements. Capability statement is 1 sheet of paper, and realize that a sheet of paper has 2 sides. So we put information on both sides. I have reviewed capability statements where I get a sheet of paper and it has information only on one side, the back side's blank. Take advantage of both sides. This is your marketing tool for your company. So we help people create those capability statements also. I probably went astray a number of times there. Why don't you pull me back if you want? Well, I think we started out as why people or companies don't get into federal contracting. So some of them it's scare tactic. Other is don't know the steps that are needed to get positioned to get a federal contract or be a subcontractor. The other thing to remember too is the federal government always pays its bills. Unlike commercial industry, you may struggle with that client or that customer and not get paid or get very delayed or have to go into a lawsuit to get paid. Now, that's not uncommon. Federal government always pays its bills. As long as you submit a complete and accurate invoice, you're gonna get paid. Federal government's got money, lots of it.
All right. Wow. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, I know a lot of people might just be interested after watching what you say, understand that, hey, you know, the first route I should go is be a subcontractor, you know, and apply for those contracts first, and then become, you know, and then work my way up to being a general, you know, going for the bigger contracts.
There are exceptions to that too, depending on the industry you're in. But generally speaking, start out as a subcontractor. An exception might be IT, for example. You're a coding company or you're selling computer hardware. You could be the prime contractor for that. But if you're going to be a landscape company or janitorial company, whatnot, start out as a subcontractor. Start learning some of the processes. Because, you know, putting a proposal together for the federal government is entirely different than putting a proposal together for private industry.
Right, right. So I want to go back a little bit to what you said. The federal government is huge, and you know the way that you describe. I mean, you said, you know, we have these different the departments, and we have these different divisions in the department. So there's a lot of opportunity to you know, get a contract from a different agency. You don't have to do with maybe Department of Defense. You can do maybe Department of Energy or something like that, or Department of Transportation. If I'm just starting out, where you think I most likely could get a contract first? Now I understand that everything is situational because you don't know what industry it is. It's a general conversation, but where should I start off first, you think, a department that I start off first at?
Yeah, so I get a lot of clients that come to me with varying degrees of preparation, let's call it. And one extreme is they heard government contracting is a great way to get rich. But they don't know what they want to sell. They don't know what they sell, but they want to be a government contractor. Well, you know, the old adage applies, do what you know. So maybe as a veteran, you learned a skill that can be used in private industry. So that's one of the things when I was in the service, when I was in boot camp, we had to list 3 different ratings that we were interested in. So I guess I've always been a person who looks into the future, plans for the future. So the 3 that I selected were trades that could be used in private industry. So I didn't want to be a tank operator or a fighter jet mechanic, although that would transfer, being a jet engine mechanic transfers well, and there's a high demand for that. So I selected postal clerk, photographer, and data processor, an IT person. And I was selected for my 3rd choice. So I became a data processor, computer operator, and programmer for my 4 years in the Navy. And I learned after 4 years that I wanted nothing to do with data processing and coding, and didn't go into that field. So that didn't pay off. But we're back to do what you know. So when you're in the service, you're hopefully learning a skill that will translate into private industry. I met a person a few years ago who was, I forget which branch of the military he was in, but he learned the skill of being a plumber. So he got out, started his own business with his wife, and now he's hired a couple of apprentices underneath of him, and he's a plumber. So do what you know. Don't just because your friends and other people in the news are going out and doing this, if you don't know that industry, you don't know that business, you're just setting yourself up for failure. Unless you're going to be like Henry Ford and hire all the experts behind you when you testify to Congress. And so in that congressional hearing, the senators were asking him a question, and based on the question, he would turn to his 15 vice presidents behind him and direct the question to them to answer. He didn't answer any of the questions. It was the 15 vice presidents behind him who answered the questions, because he didn't know. He was the owner. It was passed down from his father, whatever. Okay, so do what you know. So start out doing what you know. To get started, you're going to have to get a business license from the state that you're operating in. You're going to get incorporated or get a limited liability corporation, an LLC or an INC, a proprietary owner, whatever. Get set up with a lawyer, how you want to, consult with them, determine what kind of corporation that you want to be. Get registered with the IRS, get your TIN number or EIC. And then the next step would be find out if, we're talking about federal contracting now, get your NAICS code. And there's a website for North American Industrial Classification System to get your NAICS code. And you can have more than one. You'll have a primary code. This is the main business that you're in. An example would be manufacturing. I make widgets, but I also sell and service those widgets. So you could end up with two NAICS codes. One's for manufacturing and one's for services. So you have a primary is manufacturing, and your secondary NAICS code could be the servicing and the selling of them. It's the wholesale NAICS code as opposed to the NAICS code for manufacturing. Okay, so you got to know your NAICS codes. It's a 6-digit number. With that, then you go to another website by the Small Business Administration, because that's the agency that sets the size standards for whether you are a small business or a large business. So having your NAICS codes in hand, you go to that website, you put the NAICS code in, and you go down the list because they're in numerical sequence, and you go down to that NAICS code and it tells you the size standard. If it's a service industry, it's in millions of dollars on average over 5 years. And if it's say manufacturing, it's going to be number of employees. And so if your number of employees are less than what it says there, you're a small business. If the service industry and the size standard is say $3.6 million, well, and you're just starting out, you don't have any income, you're going to be a small business. So with that in hand, NAICS codes, and you now know your size standards for each of those NAICS codes, because it's not uncommon that a company with more than one NAICS code, one NAICS code could be a small business and another NAICS code could be a large business, and that's perfectly fine. But you need to know that, because then the next step is going into registering your company in SAM, which is System for Award Management. And one of the screens in SAM to register your company is identifying your NAICS codes. And it also will ask you, are you a small or large business for each of those NAICS codes? And it's a long process. Once you get to that point of going into sam.gov to register your company for federal contracts, there are lots of screens to go through. For example, it's going to ask you for your banking information. It's going to assign you an MPIN number. Don't disregard that. Write that down. It's very important, because every time you go back into sam.gov, it's going to ask you for your MPIN number. You don't have it, you don't get in. Okay, and it'll take a long time, because then you got to go to their help desk and answer a bunch of questions and probably send in a letter that's been notarized and so on and so forth. So don't ignore that MPIN number. And we can talk further the rest of the steps in getting a federal contract, but those are the first few: getting your state license, insurance, IRS, incorporation, getting your NAICS codes, determining your size standards, then you're ready to go into SAM to register your company. And there's a lot more steps leading up to it. In fact, in preparation for this, I printed out my class on the steps leading to a federal contract. So if we get into this, we can go page by page and you can go through that too.
Okay, cool. So, in real estate, we also talk about, one thing, you don't have to, but I think one way to alleviate some of the missteps and the long process is find a mentor, because there's things that they've been through these things and you haven't. And to start off, why go through all the hardship and time of doing it, so they get hired a mentor. So how important is hiring a mentor or find a coach to help you with getting government contracts?
You say, how hard is it?
Well, I mean, is it valuable to have a coach?
Oh, absolutely. The process in federal contracting is huge. I still have my book here from yesterday, meeting with a client. The federal government, federal agencies are subject to the federal acquisition regulation. Typically, every federal agency contracting officer has this little book that gets published a number of times throughout the year. And this one is what we call the baby FAR. This is all 53 parts of the federal acquisition regulations in fine print on thin paper. And it gets updated every 3, 4, 5 months. So as soon as it's published, it's outdated, but it's a good desk reference guide. 53 parts to the federal acquisition regulation. So I had to live with that for 29 years. What was your question again?
So it is very valuable to have a mentor or coach to help you in this process.
Yeah, and there's a lot of individuals and companies out there that will charge you to mentor you. I would start out, especially new companies, new individuals starting a company are going to be short on cash. So are there entities out there that do it for free? And the answer is yes. And SCORE is one of them. SCORE is funded through the Small Business Administration. So all of their services are free. I tell clients the difference between SCORE and PTAC. SCORE helps individuals start a business, and PTAC helps businesses expand into federal contracting. Basically, that's the difference between the two. So if you're new to starting a business, you start a business and you're going to jump right into federal contracting as a subcontractor, start out with SCORE. SCORE will help you with writing your business plan, getting your licenses, helping you with legal issues, all the steps to starting a business. That is what SCORE does, and they do it well. And they have many mentors. They're all volunteers because the SCORE program is federally funded through the Small Business Administration. Same thing with PTAC. Once you get into business for a couple of years and you want to expand into federal contracting, you want to contact your local PTAC office.
What is PTAC, sir?
Procurement Technical Assistance Center.
Okay.
The state of Washington has 8 geographic regions. Every region has a counselor, at least one counselor. I'm also a PTAC counselor. I'm in the Olympic Peninsula area for Washington, and we have 3 counselors in our area. Over in King County, where Seattle is, they have 3 counselors. In the remote areas, they may only have 1 counselor. PTAC is funded by the Department of Defense. So, through a grant, not 100%, because the state of Washington also provides money to PTAC to help businesses get state contracts, as well as the Department of Defense funding PTAC to help businesses get federal contracts. And it's all about competition. The more businesses that can compete, it's better for the government agencies in getting better prices. You get better prices from competition. Where were we?
I think you covered that, and you just talking about some of the next question I have for you. And like I said, I just want to say thank you for your time and this expounding on these subjects. Competition. What's going to separate me and my company from the next company over? What what is the steps or the marketing? Is it anything I have to do to make myself a more valuable or to get that contract over somebody else?
Number of aspects to that. An important one is every agency has to evaluate at least on two factors. Well, three: price, but experience and past performance. And so one of the issues that clients have, hey, I'm just starting a business. I'm interested in this solicitation. I want to put a proposal together, but they're asking me about my experience and my past performance. How well have I done on other contracts? You don't need to be concerned about that, because as a new company, you will be evaluated to a default satisfactory. So if you have no experience, it is better than having bad experience or bad performance evaluations. So as a new company, the federal agency, when they evaluate that technical factor, they are going to evaluate you as satisfactory. Whereas, as opposed to other companies that have been in business for years, have some bad or marginal performance evaluations, they're going to get a lower rating. So don't be concerned about having no experience, that you just started your business, and you don't have any other federal contracts or any other government contracts, and you have no published performance evaluations. Don't be concerned about that, because you will automatically default to a satisfactory evaluation. So that's important to know as a new company, that you can compete and you can be awarded a contract. The other thing is putting your proposal together. So often, and I have seen it over my 29 years, the issue is being responsive. So many companies quickly, in the 9th hour, 11th hour, put a proposal together just to get it put in, because they were too busy, didn't know about the solicitation when it first came out, just learned about it this week, and oh my gosh, I got to put a proposal together, I got to get this contract. And they don't answer everything in the solicitation. The solicitation will tell you everything that the contracting officer wants you to submit. An example that I give over and over again is, typically on a large procurement, there are three components of a proposal. It is the cover letter, the price proposal, and the technical proposal. So just taking a look at the cover letter. The agency says, provide a cover letter and identify the following 10 things. Well, if you only provided 9 out of those 10 things, you are non-responsive. And the contracting officer receives your proposal, quickly looks through it and sees that you didn't answer, you didn't provide information on number 7 of the 10 elements. And so it's non-responsive. They're not even going to evaluate your proposal. They don't have to evaluate your proposal. There are exceptions to that. Maybe they only got 2 or 3 proposals, and so they may evaluate it. But if they got 20 proposals, they're gonna start throwing out those that are non-responsive and only look at those that answered and provided all the information that they asked for in the solicitation. Then those are the responsive proposals. Those will go on to being evaluated. The price evaluation board will convene and look at the price proposal. The technical evaluation board will convene and look at the technical proposal. The contracting officer will have the cover letter and do their evaluation on that. And the steps keep going forward. There are a lot of steps once a proposal is submitted for its evaluation. And approval, a recommendation from the contracting officer. This is the apparent best contractor for fulfilling our requirement. And normally they'll rank them. This is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, and proceed to making award. Maybe number 1 falls out for some reason, and then they award to number 2. So it's all about putting your proposal together, regardless of your experience in the industry or not. You're putting your technical proposal together. Your technical proposal can have a number of technical evaluation factors. You need to address each one of those. Give the contracting officer what they've asked for. Do not give them more than what they've asked for. All that does is provide more noise, distraction, and can open up a bag of worms for you if it may require a round of discussions. You know, they read something in your technical factor for subcontracting, for example, and you provided everything that they asked for, but you went on and said other stuff, and now you've got their curiosity up because what you said over here, that raises a red flag. We need to talk to you about that. Yeah. So only provide what they ask for. That's a short, sweet little synopsis there. So there's the technical proposal, the price proposal. Many companies fall short in putting their price proposal together. I'm developing a class this year because over and over again, I keep hearing from clients they are struggling with putting a price proposal together. So overall, the top level of a price proposal is your direct costs, your indirect costs, your profit, state of Washington and 7 other states, business and occupation tax, and your insurances. Insurances can be part of your indirect costs, or they could be part of your direct costs. The biggest downfall is companies not knowing how to deal with or what is indirect costs. So they put their price proposal together, they got their direct costs, they know their greed factor, which we call profit. They want 10%, they want 30%, they want 50%, or they're going to double it. You know, their direct costs are $1 million and we're going to ask for $2 million, $1 million of profit. Oh, okay. All right. Often in the state of Washington and 7 other states, they forget about the B&O tax. You can include your B&O tax. The federal government is going to reimburse you for your B&O taxes that you have to pay to the state. It's a revenue generator for the state. So for example, the state of Washington on federal contracts levies a tax of 0.00484%. So it's based on the bottom line value of the contract, not just the labor or the equipment or the materials. It's the bottom line. After you've added your profit and your overhead, it's your price for that contract. It gets awarded at $1.5 million. The state of Washington wants 0.00484% of $1.5 million. That's that bottom line. Contractors forget to put that in there. They also have to be aware in the state of Washington, many cities follow suit to the state that they also levy a B&O tax. Many, I got a printout of the state of Washington cities that also levy a B&O tax. So for example, Bremerton, Washington, the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard is in Bremerton, Washington. There are lots of contractors working at the shipyard in Bremerton. So not only are they paying the state of Washington a B&O tax, Bremerton has a B&O tax too. So those contractors are paying the state and they also got to pay the city. So contractors need to be aware of what state they're working in and what cities they're working in and understand if there's B&O, business and occupation taxes, or whatever other names for taxes that those governments charge, included in your price proposal. But the other big one is indirect costs. That is the cost of doing business in your home office or your corporate office, whatever you want to call it. It's your secretary, your CPA, your bookkeeper, paying for the computer, the printers, the fax machine, the radios, the telephone, the company car, the insurance for it, the gas for it, your utility bills to turn on the lights, the gas, all of that stuff is indirect costs that get spread out for doing business for any and all contracts that you have. It is not a direct cost on the janitorial contract for the General Services Administration. It's an indirect cost. It's doing business. And you need to calculate that. The example that I give is there's a solicitation that's being competed and say it's for janitorial requirement. There are lots of janitorial contractors out there. All things being equal, You know, they all use the same method for cutting the grass and trimming the grass and the hedges and whatnot. So the cost, the direct cost from all the companies is going to be about the same. Okay. Then it comes down to profit. How much money do they want to make? How much profit do they want to make? And they can all be different. It could be a startup company wants to get their first contract, so they're going to have a very low profit rate because they want to get the contract. Whereas the other extreme, there's a company out there that's got lots of contracts and their employees are fully gainfully employed and they don't really care if they get this contract or not. So they mark up their costs and make it 100% profit. Now, all kinds of scenarios out there as to what profit rate you're going to put in there. And then they all include their B&O tax and their insurances and so on and so on. So all things being equal, the difference then, other than the profit rate being different, is indirect costs. So there are companies that I've worked with who don't know what indirect costs are, let alone know what their rate is for their company to include it in their price proposal. So if they don't put their indirect costs in there, their overall bottom line price is going to be less than their competitors because they didn't put their indirect costs in, right? Makes sense. All things being equal, they got the low price, they're going to get awarded the contract. So on day one, on the performance of their janitor or their grounds maintenance services contract, they're losing money on day one because their price proposal did not include their indirect costs. They're losing money on day one and they got to perform that contract for a year or however, they're losing money every day because they're not getting money to pay their electric bill. So that's where I help companies and develop their indirect cost, explain what it is. We have a one-page sheet to go through to think about things to be included, and then it can calculate. I mean, you normalize it. Some expenses are quarterly, some are daily, some are annual, and you normalize it. When we say normalize, it's make it all on a monthly basis. And you add it all up, and then depending on the solicitation, you come up with a daily rate or a percentage, and you apply that to your price proposal, and you've then got your indirect costs covered. All right, so we were talking about companies competing and what it takes. So it's don't be bashful about not having any experience in past performance, because if you're a new company and you have no experience in past performance, you're going to get evaluated as satisfactory. It doesn't hurt you. Then it's all about putting your proposal together, your technical proposal, your price proposal, and your cover letter. Okay.
Yeah. So we're running out of time right now, and I just see that, man, this is more than an hour time to talk about this and like I said, guys, you'll see his information to get a hold of him. But final question, and I think you talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, most people who be watching this are veterans. You know, we have other other people who have, you know, a minority-owned business or a female-owned business or things like that. Do they have advantages over regular businesses, you know, veteran-owned or minority-owned and things like that, and how that goes into getting the contract?
Absolutely, we get that question asked a lot. Why is it important to pursue getting a certification? It boils down to the federal agencies typically are required to do market research. Market research to our federal agency can be any number of ways. One is they can go into SAM and look for companies, System for Award Management, SAM, because that's where you register. They can use SAM to find companies to fulfill their requirement. They can also go to the Small Business Administration DSBS website. DSBS is Dynamic Small Business Search database, and all the companies are located in there and provides information about their NAICS codes and keywords and where they're located and their socioeconomic certifications and whatnot. Another method is capability statements. Another method is the agencies posting a sources sought notice in SAM.gov under contract opportunities. It's one of the 5 occasions when an agency publishes or posts a notice in sam.gov. It's called a sources sought notice. They are looking for sources to fulfill their requirement. They don't necessarily know who all out there can fulfill their requirement. So they issue a sources sought. It's typically out there for about 10 days. And it's typically only a couple of pages long. It gives a short synopsis of the requirement. It will identify a number of things that the contracting officer wants you to provide in your response to their sources sought, and will have a cutoff date. It has to be submitted by a certain date. I tell clients it is so important, do not ignore those sources sought notices, especially if you are a small business, and very especially if you have any socioeconomic certifications like veteran-owned, women-owned, hub zone, or you're in the 8A program. Because what that does, if you, let's just say you are a veteran-owned small business, you respond to the sources sought, and a couple other companies are veteran-owned or have their certification for being a veteran-owned small business. So there's 3 companies now that have responded. They are all veteran-owned small businesses. What the contracting officer can then do is they can see that I have at least 3 small businesses that are veteran-owned, have certifications as being a veteran-owned small business. That contracting officer can prepare their paperwork and submit it to the agency small business specialist and say, I want to set aside this procurement, this solicitation to only veteran-owned small businesses. So what you have done, because you have responded to a sources sought, and a couple of your other friends that are in the same industry that have the same certification, you have now eliminated your competition. Only veteran-owned small businesses can compete for the award of this contract. That's why it's so important to get those certifications and respond to sources sought notices. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Wow. 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 So you guys heard it first from Terry. A lot to learn. Please reach out to school mentors like Terry to give out this information too, because this is so much needed. You hear about it, but now you're hearing from somebody who's an expert at it to teach you guys about government contracts. Just to let you guys know, this is the first one. We will have one every month where we will have a specialist talk about a different niche to help, especially veterans, transit out of the military and get into something that they want to get into. You want to be an entrepreneur, you want to have a W-2, it doesn't matter. We want to help you achieve your goals and make you aware of all the resources and benefits that's afforded to you as a veteran. So thank you so much, Terry, for your time, for your knowledge, and we see you guys next month. God bless you.